Hey, it's Bob Ambrogi, and if you're watching this on video, you can see that I am on the road today, but I want to tell you about this week's episode of Law Next. If content is the raw material of generative AI, it only makes sense that an AI-driven contract automation platform would want to acquire the world's largest database of contracts and clauses. That's exactly what happened recently when SimpleDocs, a company with an AI contract drafting, redlining, and review platform, acquired Law Insider, which claims to be home to 5 million contracts and 20 million clauses spanning more than 50 languages. One aspect of this acquisition that makes it particularly interesting is that both companies were founded by the same person. And that person is my guest today, Preston Clark. You might say this isn't a typical acquisition story, but more the deliberate convergence of two complementary businesses that were built separately over more than a decade, each with its own DNA, but always with an eye toward this eventual combination. In an AI market increasingly criticized for being, quote, just GPT wrappers, Preston and his team are betting that workflow-specific tools powered by real contract data will deliver the precision and ROI that legal departments and law firms are demanding. In our conversation, Preston walks us through the strategic thinking behind this acquisition and how this combined entity plans to differentiate itself in an increasingly crowded legal AI market. He also shares his vision for the future, one that extends beyond contract drafting and review into adjacent workflows that could reshape how legal teams interact with contracts altogether. This is Bob Ambrogi, and this is Law Next, the podcast that features the innovators and entrepreneurs who are driving what's next in law. Before we get to any of that, please take a moment to hear from the sponsors who so generously support this podcast. Looking for law practice management software that actually understands your specialty? Case is built specifically for workers' compensation, employment and labor, and insurance defense firms. With Case, you'll get tailored features like intelligent document management, streamlined time tracking, integrated billing, and seamless payment reconciliation, all designed around how your firm works. Join the firms that have transformed their practice at meruscase.com. That's MERUSCASE.com.
You didn't go to law school to waste time writing and responding to discovery requests. Never waste time on discovery again with BriefPoint. BriefPoint drafts your discovery responses and requests for documents within minutes of your first sign-in. BriefPoint is the most reliable discovery drafting solution on the market, and it works right out of the box. Get your first document drafted by going to briefpoint.ai and clicking Get Started. No credit card required. BriefPoint. Draft what matters, automate the rest.
Now let's get to today's conversation.
Preston, welcome back to Law Next.
Thanks, Bob. Thanks for having me.
Always nice to see you. Hope you're doing well.
Likewise.
So the headline here is SimpleDocs has acquired Law Insider, but why don't you start by kind of giving us the story behind the headline? What's the strategy here?
Yeah. Law Insider, really long-term project. Started it a decade and a half ago. Always about data, always about surfacing public contract data to the global legal community. And the result was very fruitful. We've had millions of users and thousands of paying customers. But it always really was just a foundation for something, or at least that's how I saw it. We didn't know for what. We knew it would be something in the legal tech sphere or market. But with the rise of legal AI, in particular, the application to contracts, I saw an opportunity to build a sister business or an adjacent business that would go after contract automation for in-house teams, for law firms.
And a sister business because you are the founder of both businesses.
And notable, I am the co-founder of both, right? So these were different teams built at much different times. Law Insider was created, as I mentioned, a very long time ago with a couple of good friends, including someone I went to elementary school with in Seattle, and long history there. And then SimpleDocs also has different ownership, different leadership, or at least it did until today. And so these were projects that I thought, or I believe strongly, needed to be segregated at inception, or at least I thought SimpleDocs needed to be carved out separately so that it could find its own way and be much more enterprise software focused. Because, Law Insider, I think majority of the world associate Law Insider with a freely available repository or database of sample contracts. And that's what it is known for. And that's very different from building a reputation on selling legal AI software. So we went and started that separate project. It was always about getting to this day. It was always about bringing them together. But to sort of jump ahead a bit, you wrote a story a few months ago where we announced a partnership between the two organizations to effectively bring AI tools to market that are co-developed. And I can share some data with you, but the first 90 days just exceeded all expectations. And so at that point, I was like, okay, this is done. We have to do this. We have to bring these businesses together. It's time. But it could have.
So what happened there?
Like,
just to be clear, basically SimpleDocs helped Law Insider launch a redlining tool within Law Insider based on the SimpleDocs technology. Right?
That's right. That's right. And listen,
and
in hindsight, and maybe in every respect, it sounds wonderfully complicated, and I suppose that it is. But welcome to the life of a bootstrapper, right? Like, I'm good at building things as tests, as hypotheses, and I've launched plenty of things, as others will tell you, that have failed.
Yeah.
And so
it doesn't sound all that complicated, really, because I mean, the way I think about it, I'm oversimplifying it, but SimpleDocs is the tech company. Law Insider is the content company, essentially. And bringing them together, especially in an age of AI, seems to make a whole lot of sense.
Yeah. And I think the one maybe non-obvious part, so I'm glad that it makes sense to you, and I hope it makes sense to your audience too. I think that the one part that maybe is non-obvious is that might we have incubated this inside of Law Insider? And the reality is, you have an engineering team, you have a customer success and support team, you have a sales team that is focused on a largely consumer-based relationship where individual lawyers are paying to access sample contract language. Like, the entire DNA of Law Insider is different from a sort of SaaS legal AI tool or platform. So I think the incubation to me had to be outside because it needed a different team to build it. So that's the complex part. But now, as we come together, it suddenly gets very simple again.
Yeah. Was there ever a discussion as to which should be acquiring which?
Totally. Yeah. Whether it should be a straight merger, would one brand go away? And Electra and I talked a bunch about this, and my co-founders, Ali and Jordan, and I talked about it too. And effectively what we came down to is that, like, an analogy is sort of Intel Inside. It's that what Law Insider is known for is data, and what it is not known for is software. And if what we are selling is software, then the value is Law Insider Inside, not Law Insider as a product or as a brand, or at least as a standalone brand. And so we had some very heated debates about it. And as we work through it together, we all arrived at the same place, which was SimpleDocs should be the brand, and Law Insider should be the data engine that elevates our brand in a very crowded market, right? I'm sure after this story hits, there's going to be 3 more great stories about our competitors. And so we also know that there needs to be differentiation, and Law Insider represents that. So it can't go away as a brand. It's just that the masthead will be SimpleDocs.
In announcing this acquisition, you described this as setting a new standard for contract automation. What does that new standard look like in practical terms?
Yeah. So the backdrop of that question is I'm not a big Redditor. I don't spend much time on Reddit or really any, but I know that there's some talk about the failings of legal AI after the most optimistic ride, and you can attest to this, the most optimistic we've ever been about legal tech has been the last 12 months. and both from an investment and adoption and just market sentiment perspective. And now there's this new undercurrent, as there should be and you'd expect,
You're
which
talking
is
about the Harvey stuff.
talking about the
just a
Harvey
GPT wrapper. That's
yeah,
become the new criticism, right? Yeah, well, that's the thing.
Yeah, aren't we all just AWS wrappers? So there's this idea that it lacks precision, it lacks utility, it lacks ROI, it lacks adoption. It's not really getting used. It's smoke and mirrors, on and on and on. And I think that that's actually juxtaposed against, and Anna just published a great study, which you also covered, that's sort of talking about how workflow and use case specific software implementations for legal can actually be incredibly valuable. But that to us is the gap. And so to answer your question directly, the difference between well-performing or well-tailored legal AI and just general Claude, ChatGPT, et cetera, is how much it is configured to your exact use case, and more importantly, how much it is configured to your exact specifications. And in the world of for litigation, that means something different. For immigration, that means something different. For contracts, what does that mean? And this is your question. It means that I have configured playbooks and workflows that mirror my exact process, what I reject, what I accept, how I move paper within and without my organization, how things are approved, what are my fallback positions, what are my standard comments, how do I issue spot, all of these things, if tailored and mirrored against your manual process, I think it's undeniable that not only is it useful and valuable, that it is categorically different from what you would get off the shelf with a ChatGPT type solution. What you should pay for that, and other questions are still worthy of debate. But I think no one can deny that if it is configured, it is uniquely and extremely valuable. We are in a position to do that now, both as just an enterprise organization that has legal engineers that can configure this, but also with the added advantage of having an incredible contract precedent database in Law Insider that can benchmark, that can establish what's market, that can tell you if an employment agreement is, ought to have two clauses that the one you're looking at does not. Whether or not this unlimited liability clause is, or this mutual liability clause is properly structured or structured in a way that is standard. These are things that allow you to not just base it off of your own precedent, but to base it off of market precedent. And that's what Law Insider gives us access to. And there's some work to be done, right? We're not just snapping our fingers and saying everything is now available, but we have the data. And so that is the qualitative upgrade that we think will be a big differentiator. And we also think, you're not asking me this question, but I think our thesis is that this will resonate and be logical, because as we were preparing for this acquisition and we're talking to the market and telling people what's coming, immediately head nod. People are familiar with Law Insider. They know what data is there. They know how they've used that data in the past to benchmark. And the idea that the AI can now do that automatically for them alongside Microsoft Word or in the browser environment is very powerful.
Yeah. So you talk about precedent-based AI, and that's what you're talking about. You're talking about being able to establish your AI on the foundation of this data that you have, which you've described as the world's largest collection of contracts and clauses, I think. Maybe to play devil's advocate a little bit, having a lot of something doesn't necessarily mean you have the best of something or the right of something, right? How do you get to ensuring that that's what your AI is delivering to customers?
Yeah. So having a lot of something doesn't mean that you have the best of something. As a general matter, over the past 20 years, the Edgar database, maybe in particular, has been used in very precise and exacting ways to leverage actionable insights like what's market. And that is not the same as just saying whether or not a certain liquidated damages clause occurs with high degree of frequency within Edgar or within Law Insider. And so you are exactly right that there has to be a layer of intelligence and intent that does not happen just by aggregating large sums of data and saying whatever it tells you should therefore be. And so we have spent years doing approximations of what's standard for different agreement types and different clauses already within Law Insider. But the real job to be done now is going in with greater intent and precision to filter out the data so that it becomes more actionable. So I guess I would say that there's still work to be done there, but there's countless vendors before us, IntelliGeyes and others, that I think have done really good jobs or did do really good jobs of filtering the data in the right way to create actionable insights. And so we have the data, we have the internal expertise, and now it's time to bring that into the product.
So as you do that, you've said you have 5 million contracts, 20 million clauses plus in the mix here. How do you bring that all together? How do you integrate that data with SimpleDocs? What does that begin to look like to users of these products?
Yeah. So there will be two environments. There'll be a web-based primarily drafting tool. You will be able to review and redline in a browser environment, but we're sort of assuming that the majority of the world wants to do that inside Microsoft Word. So we'll be inside browser, inside Microsoft. The use cases at the high level that we're representing is drafting and reviewing. In the case of drafting, it's about comparing the language that you're generating yourself or that the AI is generating, comparing it against market standards, comparing it against what's market. You may go against what's market. You may go against what is reasonable, right? We talk, Electra talks a lot about standards and sort of what's favorable or too favorable to one side versus the other. We're not going to force the user's hand in sort of compelling them to be balanced. If what you want to be is imbalance, you should have every right to do that. But the idea is that the browser, from a drafting perspective, will continually compare the work product that you're generating against what's market, against benchmark, both at the whole contract level and at the clause level. So at the contract level, Bob, it might show you what clauses are missing, and for the clauses that you've created, how standard or how comparable they are to what's market analysis. The converse of that is inside Microsoft Word, where you're looking, perhaps it's red lines that have come back, but I think the better example to illustrate is where you are reviewing a third-party agreement for the first time, MSA, partnership agreement, DPA, and you sort of now have two ways to analyze the document. You have your own configured playbook that is defending your internal positions. We don't accept this. We accept this. This is our choice of law. This is, we don't accept non-solicitation in NDAs, whatever the example is. And then there's this added filter, which is where I think the magic will be, which is an individual scoring at the clause level and at the contract level at large with proposed changes. So you will not only get a sort of like a risk rating at the clause and contract level to say whether or not something is too favorable to one side or not, but you'll also get redline proposed changes because it will understand which party you're representing in the agreement. And this is where you can layer these things together. So you can take your own default positions and say, here's what we want to defend. But if this agreement is also like so far out of bounds, or the counterparty has sort of surreptitiously tried to inject something in here that I didn't even know to be checking for because it's so inappropriate to be in this agreement, the AI and the precedent of Law Insider will catch it, will flag it, and will propose a change against it. So that's sort of a broad summary of how it works in practice, but always centered on efficiency in drafting and benchmarking, either against your own precedent or the precedent of Law Insider.
And from a product branding perspective, I guess, everything that you've just described, is that happening in SimpleDocs? Is that happening in Law Insider? Is that happening in
Yeah.
both?
So the products will be powered, as you said earlier, the products are powered by SimpleDocs. It's SimpleDocs software.
Right.
And within SimpleDocs, we'll have our own product names, like Simple AI is the name of our word add-in,
Right.
as an example. And then the intelligence, because SimpleDocs doesn't have, there's 100 ways we could do this, Bob, but our job is to do the one that is the most obvious or the most intuitive to our customer base. And in this case, when we're talking about established precedent, Law Insider will be the engine behind it. So today, and I think we've demoed this for you in the past. Today, if you go inside the word add-in, there's something called the Law Insider Index Score that'll compare an AI generated clause against the Law Insider database to determine and assess how standard the language is. That's sort of one small use case. But in that scenario, what we're surfacing for the customer is the Law Insider Index Score, because that is what is familiar. It's familiar that Law Insider houses a massive database. There's reputation there. There's credibility there. So the umbrella, the product is SimpleDocs, but the intel inside, so to speak, is powered by Law Insider.
You talked about the fact that you earlier this year kind of, in a sense, tested the waters for this acquisition in developing this the application within Law Insider using SimpleDocs. I mean, were there kind of specific things that you learned from that test case, in a sense, that you're now bringing as you announce this acquisition and move forward?
Yeah, there was. So, and my sort of competing founders and vendors will appreciate this, and probably others too. But there's two things we were looking for. We were looking for channel market fit, and we were looking for time to value. And I think those are both understood terms, but I'll give specific context here. So, channel market fit. We knew we had a product that the market wanted. We had enough customers at this point pre-partnership to know that the product worked and the core features worked and people liked it. We had a strong level of conviction that Law Insider, which had for years attracted transactional lawyers to help them draft and negotiate faster, would be a good distribution point for AI contract tools. Everything stacked up, but like oftentimes in business, everything can stack up and then you sort of turn it on and nothing happens. It just doesn't work to the extent that you expected it to. And so I had a high degree of optimism that we would be able to validate channel market fit, but it exceeded my expectations. So that just means more people took to it than I could have ever imagined. And so that was wonderful. And so that was proof point number one. And then proof point number two was Law Insider has historically been very low touch. Like we don't have a huge customer success organization at Law Insider, despite having, over 10,000 customers, because product's easy to use. People get the value. They don't need a lot of help accessing it. And you start introducing legal AI tools that are known for being, hard to adopt or steep learning curve, non-intuitive, et cetera. Like, could we get people to raise their hand, say, I want it? And then could we get them to use it? And then would they come back, right? Because we can get anyone to use something once, presumably. But if they didn't, if either the usefulness wasn't there or they just couldn't figure out how to get to it, then that was problem number two. And I think in the first 90 days post partnership launch, like both metrics exceeded our expectation. And so that was measured by the number of people who raised their hand, the number of people who, for example, installed the word add-in and logged in and used it for the first time, and then the percentage of those people who came back to use it again. And those were the metrics, sort of how we looked at the performance of the partnership. And every one of those just, sort of was up and to the right every day.
We've talked a couple of times already in this interview about your customers. Who are your customers?
Yeah. So Law Insider historically serving English language contracts to a global audience. We've diversified in the last few years, and so we have lots of contracts in non-English now, but in the beginning we didn't, and for years we didn't. And so then you'd say, okay, well, who's looking for that? Well, so certainly attorneys in the US, Australia, Canada, UK, etc. But it turns out lots of attorneys all over the world as well who draft and negotiate in English, which is quite common, as you know, in all sorts of countries and all sorts of use cases. Within a global audience, it tends to be in-house that are under-resourced, who don't have access to practical law or don't have access to some other tool. This is historically. Mm-hmm. And then solos and individual lawyers who, for whatever reason, either have sort of gone rogue because the tools they have in their firm aren't working for them, or they just need something else. And so that's sort of, it's those three buckets: in-house, solos, like solo attorneys, and then individual lawyers within sort of mid-sized to large firms. And for SimpleDocs, the thesis around the word add-in was initially focused on in-house. Mm-hmm. So we did a lot of work with Playbook and a lot of sort of advanced setup for high volume use cases where you're defending a consistent position over and over again, which sort of lends itself to the in-house use case. But since that time, it's sort of, with the partnership of Law Insider, we're bringing on large law firms in Japan. We're bringing on large in-house teams in Saudi Arabia. And so it has exceeded my expectations, but I think that the user base still mirrors the Law Insider profile for the most part, being a global audience that are in one of those three buckets. So we have broad applicability, which is wonderful. And because the AI is so wonderful at navigating across languages, I think our utility has increased dramatically as well, because before Law Insider only had a fraction of contracts that were available in non-English, and now you can generate and draft and review in virtually any language.
So far, you've heard Preston walk us through the strategic rationale behind SimpleDocs acquiring Law Insider, explaining how this combination brings together enterprise software capabilities with the world's largest database of contract precedents. When we come back, we'll talk about how this acquisition positions SimpleDocs in the increasingly competitive landscape of AI contract tools. But first, please take this opportunity to learn about the sponsors whose generosity keeps this podcast running. Your specialized law practice deserves specialized software. Meriscase is the legal practice management solution built exclusively for workers' compensation, employment and labor, and insurance defense firms. Meriscase delivers purpose-built features, including advanced document management, precision time tracking, automated billing, and integrated payment reconciliation. Ready to see what legal practice management software should be? Visit meriscase.com today. That's MERUSCASE.com.
The $10 million call doesn't always come during business hours. Sometimes it's 10 p.m. and there's no one there to answer. Eve AI Intake is the always-on system trusted by top plaintiff firms to capture every lead, qualify every case, and make sure the biggest opportunities never slip away. Firms like Mike Morse Law are already using Eve to handle after-hours calls and keep million-dollar cases from slipping away. Visit eve.legal/intake. That's eve.legal/intake so you don't miss the next $10 million call at 10 p.m.
As we get back to the conversation, I'll ask Preston for his assessment of where SimpleDocs stands in the competitive landscape for AI contract tools. We also talk about the critical role that legal engineering will play in delivering real ROI and avoiding the pitfalls that have plagued some high-profile legal AI products. Let's get back to it.
You talked kind of right at the outset of our interview today about the landscape for AI contract tools and how, just between the time you and I talk and this gets posted, it might change somewhat. But how do you think this changes your place in that landscape? How does this acquisition, where does this position you in that landscape now, as opposed to some of the competitors out there?
So if I can speak directly,
we're off the record.
We're off the record. Yeah, totally. We see our most viable competitors, or we measure our most viable competitors by the number of evaluations that we find ourselves against the same recurring competitors. And that, just to be very transparent, Spellbook and Evo are the ones that we go up against the most. We see them the most often. We think that they're very worthy competitors. I think Scott is a tremendous CEO at Spellbook, and I think they're both building very excellent software. And I think that we are as well. I think that because we have built and grown in an untraditional way, because we're bootstrapped, because we're sort of bringing together two entities, we've had some brand confusion. We've had some sort of need to absorb some of the operational complexity of existing two businesses, which now gets to go away. And so my expectation coming out of this, Bob, is that we become the de facto third player in the market. And that's not knocking Legalon and others. I think that there's plenty to go around, because one other time in my business career, I've entered a greenfield market, a new category that was universally determined to be, there's budget available, there's urgency from C-level, and everyone's buying it for the first time. Like, this never happens. I had one other time in a much smaller market. It was compliance driven for higher ed. And it lasts, 18 months, 24 months, 36 months if you're lucky. And so all we want is to become one of the dominant players, and there'll be two or three that I think win the lion's share. It's not going to be winner take all. And that's what I want for SimpleDocs. And it's what I expect for SimpleDocs. I think it just, given our reach and distribution with Law Insider, we're already doing, 250 inbound sales inquiries a month. And so and this is globally. So I expect that will only increase with this announcement and with the new features we're adding, that we've been talking about today. And, I ultimately hope that we are the biggest player in the space. But I think for now we'll look to be on par with our two biggest competitors.
As you mentioned, this acquisition allows you to merge your corporate structures and your executive team into a single team. One member of that team is Electra Yaponis, who was Chief Legal Officer at Law Insider, now becomes Chief Legal Officer at this combined company. She came into your company formally about a year ago when you acquired 1NDA, which was the open source company. She had started to develop an open source NDA standard and other open source standards. In announcing this acquisition, you said that Electra will have a mandate to expand the legal engineering function. What does that mean? What is she going to be working on? What's that focus look like?
Yeah. So legal engineering relates back to time to value and relates back to this Harvey Reddit debacle or scandal or whatever we call it, where we say how unique is what's being built versus standard, off the shelf LLMs, and how much ROI can it represent? And listen, I like high margin software, right? As much as the next founder, but the reality is that the true value of playbook or workflow implementation requires effort. None of us went to law school to learn how to do this. you go to an in-house team, they have their own perceptions of what a playbook is or what a workflow is. They have their own documentation that can take up very different forms. They have lots of fallback language and nuance. And the reality is there's both an educational orientation process for these teams. What can the AI do? What can't it do? How does it work? How does it relate to your current process? And how do we extract your current process and then redesign it in the tool in a way that is intuitive for you and also a way that you can then modify, update in the future so that you're not being dependent upon us or Electra's team to make every small change as your policies change. And so we see the role of legal engineering being critical, almost like customer success or almost like a sales engineer role would be in traditional enterprise software, where we are rolling up our sleeves both pre-sale and post-sale to learn the habits, the negotiation policies of an organization, and then beginning to implement those using AI in a very exacting way. And so that's what her team does. It is wonderfully difficult, even with the advancements in AI that are made. If any vendor is saying that you just upload a document and then sort of your playbook is completely set up and reviews perfectly, it's like it's categorically and inherently imperfect, because whatever document you give does not possibly embody your actual positions. So work is always to be done. We take that work very seriously. It's a part of our service model. We don't charge for it. It's sort of built into the subscription. And Electra, given her background, not only with one NDA, but going back to TLB, where she literally built a legal outsourcing business that streamline contract review on behalf of clients. Like, this is, she nails this. She's the exact person to do this. But I believe it's something that every legal tech company in our position sort of has to be excellent at, which is why this is sort of the new hot role in legal tech. You see all the job posts looking for legal engineers.
Yep. As I mentioned, what kind of brought her into the company in the first place was one NDA, and continued to work on developing open source standards around SaaS agreements and other types of agreements. What does this acquisition mean for those efforts?
Yeah. So there's two sides to that. On one hand, Law Insider, as a publicly available contract database, it ought to have a library of standard templates like one NDA. And so that investment will continue, and the adoption of one NDA, even though we don't celebrate it as much as we should or talk about it as much as we should in this AI wave, is at all-time high. So more people are using one NDA than ever before, and that it has great network effects that accelerate. So, and that investment will continue, that commitment will continue. How it then manifests inside the software we're building, I think, is relatively obvious, but very interesting. And that is that whether it's a standard contract or a standard playbook, what we're doing is we are using the one NDA community, the Law Insider community, the data that's accessible to us to start producing standardized tools, whether that is a standard contract. So when you go into draft mode, that you can pull from one NDA or one DPA as a part of your starting point for that draft, or conversely, standard playbooks that have really good starting points and expert elements of the things that you should be looking for when you're reviewing a cloud service agreement or a partnership agreement, or whatever it may be, that of course are configurable to your exact requirements, the same way one NDA is from a drafting perspective. But now to sort of use that famous sort of sword versus shield analogy we learned in law school, it's sort of, the contract becomes, the standard contract becomes your sword, and the playbook becomes your shield, where you can defend those same principles, but in a way where you don't know exactly what odd draft of an agreement is coming your way, but you can use AI and the principles of the standards to defend your negotiation positions, irrespective of how that contract was drafted.
Mm-hmm. Makes a lot of sense.
It's all coming together, Bob. Just took me a minute.
All coming together. Both of these companies have been pretty much privately owned. According to you, they've been profitable, at least according to the company's materials. They've both been profitable. So now, as you look to kind of establish yourself as one of those dominant players, do you see yourself taking on outside investment in order to scale these companies?
Yeah, I hope not. I think that we get to play by different rules if we don't raise capital. We get to pursue different outcomes. We get to price more competitively. We get to stay more focused on the use cases that are profitable and that are making our customers the happiest. I built a career working in venture-backed and private equity-owned businesses. I know how the machine works, and I'd rather not. I'd rather not. I know that there are forcing market functions that would necessitate outside capital, and it may just be the terms may be too good, the market too big for us to not take the money to accelerate growth. But I'm really going to fight against that. I think that we can build a really big, excellently managed business that serves our customers, and that we can do it with our own capital.
So never say never, but you're not out there knocking on doors right now.
No, yeah, and hope not to be for a long time.
Yeah. So if I am a customer of yours, when do I actually start to see the fruits of this acquisition? When do I see something tangible coming around to my desktop or my computer as I go forward?
Yeah, so we are moving very, very quickly. We have an incredible engineering team led by our CTO, Jordan Trevino, and we are launching new features weekly. Some of the deeper what's market and benchmarking that require filters on top of the Law Insider database, I expect to be December, January. So, within this quarter or the next quarter. But there will be incremental improvements that are the benefit of a combined engineering team and a combined product org and just a combined focus that we just couldn't have had before as two separate businesses. So short answer is a lot is coming soon, but there's some real hard work to be done on the what's market and benchmarking side that we're going to be very thoughtful about, that Electra is going to be very thoughtful about, so that when we launch these tools, that they'll be market tested and they'll be defensible by the very scrutinizing market that is the lawyer buyer. So we will do this right, but we expect it to be done quickly.
Is there a longer term part to this vision or this roadmap that we had that goes beyond what we talked about here over the last half hour or so?
Sure. So it's good to have a forward-looking vision internally, and it's good to show our customers the roadmap and its expansiveness or where we're heading, so that they have more confidence in where we're going relative to other competitors they might be contemplating. I think that we have a greenfield moment, as I mentioned. We can't miss it. We have to stay focused and execute ruthlessly on it, or we'll regret it. That will be saturated. And again, I think we're 18 months away. And then where are we? Do we have 10,000 legal AI customers? Do we have 20,000? I don't think we'll have 20. I think we'll have in the teens of thousands, which is enormous. And the beauty of this market or this category in particular, Bob, is that if we're talking about contracts, then there's all of these adjacencies of how contracts are exposed, obligation management, alerts, routing, self-serve access, approval flows, all the things that surround contracts. And I won't say CLM out loud, because I think that that's going to reemerge in a new form that is, as I've said before, is much more unbundled and much more AI native. But I do think that for enterprise and for law firms, there are very necessary adjacent solutions that they will ask of vendors like us. And I think that that's where the ultimate billion-dollar opportunity lies for us and companies like ours, is how much of this new emerging market can we capture in the window that is available to us, which is not much more. And then how well can we serve those customers with their adjacent needs thereafter? And I think that will be the larger upside over the next 3 to 5 years once this new market surge has sort of leveled out.
For people listening to you right now, is there anything else that you want them to know about this acquisition that we haven't talked about so far?
I think that I've been at this for a really long time. I care deeply about what we're building, and I think that Electra does, and I think Jordan does. And what I'm most excited about is over-delivering, under-promising. I think that I have to stand up here and use words like revolutionize and disrupt and things like this, both because I believe them and because, we need to, this is a story and it's worthy of making a splash. But the majority of my time is not wearing a suit, talking to you, Bob, as much as I love talking to you. Most of the time is talking to customers, talking to prospects, talking to the engineering team, doing the work. And I'm just excited to show the world how hard we're working, and I think how much our customers are influencing the roadmap. And so I sort of want to say, just wait and see, or just, I can't wait to have a conversation with you about this a year from now when we see, our NPS score, when we see our retention numbers, when we see our adoption curve, because I think that, certainly Law Insider is a great distribution vehicle for us, but it's going to be our reputation that prevails. And I think that we're going to have a great one because of the hard work that we do.
Well, I'll hold you to that promise of coming back a year from now to
Please.
give us an update on all of this. I'd love to do that. And congratulations on this acquisition. This is really great.
Thank you, Bob. Really appreciate it. Thanks for taking the time. Thanks for the great questions, as always.
Thanks to you for taking the time to come on the show and talk about it.
For sure.
Thanks for joining us on today's show. I hope you enjoyed it. If you'd like to share your own thoughts or comments, please do so by messaging us on LinkedIn or other social media, or just email me directly. It's ambrogi@gmail.com. If you're a fan of the show, please leave us a review. LawNext is a production of LawNext Media. I'm your host, Bob Ambrogi. Hope you'll join us again next time for another episode of Law Next.